The 2026 FIFA World Cup is supposed to be a celebration. The biggest tournament in football history. 48 teams, 3 host nations, 16 host cities, more matches than ever before, more fans than ever before, more revenue than ever before. And yet, only days before kickoff, an uncomfortable question has started following the tournament everywhere it goes. What if bigger isn't automatically better? Because beneath the excitement, beneath the marketing campaigns, beneath the promises of a historic global festival, there are warning signs emerging from multiple directions at the same time. Ticket controversies, travel complications, visa concerns, heat warnings, fan affordability questions, and perhaps most importantly, a growing feeling among some supporters that the World Cup is becoming harder to access. Not because they don't love football, but because football's biggest tournament may be drifting away from the people who made it special in the first place. Before we continue, subscribe if you enjoy deep football documentaries, because this story may become one of the defining conversations of modern football. And the warning sign FIFA cannot ignore anymore isn't about one controversy. It's about a pattern that raises a much bigger question about the future of the World Cup itself. Because when you look closely, all of these issues point toward the same concern. The relationship between football's biggest event and football's ordinary supporters. And that's where this story begins. For decades, the World Cup represented something unique. Not just football. Accessibility. A tournament where supporters from every corner of the planet gathered in one place. Argentinians, Moroccans, Ghanaians, Japanese fans, Mexicans, Croatians, English supporters, Brazilians, different cultures, different languages. One tournament. That mixture is part of what makes the World Cup feel different from every other competition. The football matters, but so do the people in the stands, the colors, the songs, the stories, the atmosphere. Without supporters, a World Cup is just a schedule of matches. With supporters, it becomes a global event. That is why the first warning sign matters so much. Ticket affordability. Because throughout the build-up to 2026, ticket pricing has become one of the most discussed issues surrounding the tournament. Supporter organizations raised concerns about costs. Lawmakers questioned FIFA's pricing model. Critics argued that demand-based pricing risked pushing ordinary fans further away from the competition. Now, FIFA's position is understandable. Demand for World Cup tickets remains enormous. In fact, FIFA reported more than 150 million ticket requests during an early ticketing phase, the highest demand in tournament history. That statistic sounds reassuring. And in some ways, it is. People clearly still care deeply about the World Cup. But demand alone doesn't answer the deeper question. Who is actually able to attend? Because football history teaches us something important. A sold-out stadium and an accessible stadium are not necessarily the same thing. Think about what made Germany 2006 so beloved, or South Africa 2010, or even Russia 2018. Supporters often remember the people they met almost as much as the matches they watched. The World Cup has always depended on fan mobility, and that's where another challenge emerges. Travel. For the first time in history, the tournament will stretch across 3 countries and enormous geographical distances. FIFA views this as a historic achievement, and there are clear benefits. More infrastructure, more stadiums, more commercial opportunities, more communities involved. But there is also a cost. The sheer scale of movement required. A supporter could potentially find themselves flying thousands of miles between matches. A team could move between entirely different climates. A family attending multiple games may face hotel costs, transportation expenses, and logistical challenges unlike anything seen at previous World Cups. That may sound like a small issue. It isn't, because every additional barrier removes another layer of accessibility. And once accessibility begins disappearing, football culture starts changing with it. But travel costs are only one part of the story, because some supporters face an even more fundamental challenge: actually entering the host country. In recent months, visa and travel concerns have repeatedly surfaced around the tournament. Several participating nations have faced uncertainty surrounding travel restrictions and entry requirements. The situation involving Iranian supporters became especially revealing. Just days before the tournament, Iran's Football Federation announced that its allocated ticket quota had been withdrawn, leaving supporters who had already planned travel facing uncertainty. FIFA later said it was working toward solutions. Think about what that means. The issue is not simply tickets. The issue is predictability. Fans save for years to attend a World Cup. Some plan entire family trips. Others travel halfway around the world for a single match. When uncertainty enters that process, confidence begins to weaken. And confidence is one of the foundations upon which international tournaments depend. But the complications didn't stop there. Shortly before the competition, Somali referee Omar Abdulkader Artan was denied entry despite holding a visa, preventing him from participating in what would have been a historic World Cup appearance. Now, every case has its own circumstances. Every government has its own immigration policies, and FIFA cannot control every sovereign decision. That counterargument is important, but from the perspective of global football, the optics matter. Because the World Cup is built on the idea that football brings the world together. When travel itself becomes a recurring headline, that idea inevitably comes under pressure. And that's when the story becomes bigger than logistics.
Because another warning sign has emerged from a completely different direction. The climate. The 2026 World Cup is expected to be the largest ever. 104 matches. 16 cities. Millions of supporters moving across North America. Researchers estimate the tournament could generate roughly 7.8 million metric tons of carbon emissions. More than double the estimated footprint of Qatar 2022. Now, FIFA has highlighted its sustainability initiatives. The organization points out that existing stadiums are being used rather than constructing entirely new ones. And that deserves recognition. But critics argue that the scale of travel required creates an environmental challenge unlike anything previous World Cups have faced. And then there is the issue of heat. Studies have warned that approximately a quarter of tournament matches could be played in conditions exceeding recommended safety thresholds. That matters for players. But it also matters for supporters. Because football isn't experienced through television alone. It is experienced in queues, on trains, outside stadiums, walking through cities, standing in fan zones. The supporter experience extends far beyond 90 minutes. And that's why even relatively small decisions can become symbolic. Recently, FIFA faced criticism after banning reusable water bottles inside stadiums, citing safety concerns. Supporter groups argued the move could create health risks during hot conditions. FIFA responded by outlining mitigation measures including hydration stations and cooling facilities. Notice something interesting here. Ticketing, travel, visas, heat, environmental concerns. At first glance, these appear to be separate stories. They aren't. They all point toward the same underlying question. How easy is it for ordinary football supporters to participate in the biggest tournament on earth? And that is where the warning sign becomes impossible to ignore. Because this conversation isn't really about 2026. It's about the direction of football. For decades, FIFA's strategy has been built around expansion. More teams, more matches, more markets, more viewers, more revenue. And to be fair, expansion has delivered genuine benefits. 48 teams means more nations get the opportunity to participate. More players experience the World Cup. More supporters see their countries represented. That is a powerful argument. It is also why many people support the new format. But every expansion creates trade-offs. More teams require more venues. More venues require more travel. More travel increases costs. More costs affect supporters. And eventually, a fundamental question emerges. At what point does growth begin affecting the experience itself? Former players and analysts have already begun debating whether the expanded format could dilute some of the intensity traditionally associated with the tournament. Perhaps they are wrong. Perhaps the football will be spectacular. History suggests that once the ball starts rolling, many concerns disappear. Qatar 2022 faced enormous skepticism before kickoff. Then Lionel Messi lifted the trophy. And much of the conversation changed. That possibility absolutely exists here too. Football has a remarkable ability to rescue itself. The sport often succeeds despite the controversies surrounding it. And FIFA would argue that this tournament could become proof that the expanded World Cup model works. Record attendance. Record audiences. Record revenues. Record participation. Those outcomes remain entirely possible. But even if the tournament succeeds commercially, the warning sign remains. Because the issue isn't whether FIFA can sell tickets. The issue is whether supporters continue feeling ownership of the event. Think about what has always made football different from many other global entertainment products. The emotional connection. Football supporters do not consume the sport. They belong to it. They inherit clubs. They inherit rivalries. They inherit traditions. That relationship is fragile. And when supporters begin asking whether football's biggest tournament is becoming harder to reach, harder to afford, or harder to navigate, football's leadership should pay attention. Not because the tournament is failing, but because the concerns reveal something deeper. A gap between growth and experience. A gap between commercial success and supporter accessibility. A gap that may still be manageable today, but could become much larger tomorrow. And that brings us back to the central question. What exactly is the warning sign FIFA cannot ignore anymore? It isn't one ticket controversy. It isn't one visa dispute. It isn't one travel complication. It isn't one climate concern. The warning sign is the accumulation of all of them. The growing sense that every new layer of expansion introduces another obstacle between football and the people who love it most. And now I'd genuinely like to hear your perspective. Do you think supporters are right to be concerned? Or do you believe these fears will disappear once the football begins? Let me know in the comments below. Because ultimately, the 2026 World Cup may still become a spectacular tournament. The goals will come. The stories will emerge. New heroes will be created. Football almost always finds a way. But the challenge facing FIFA goes beyond organizing matches. It's preserving the connection between the World Cup and the supporters who give it life. The stadiums are ready. The tournament is bigger than ever. The question is whether the people running football remember what made it special in the first place. Let the football be worth it.